Welcome everyone back to the EUVC podcast. Today, we're joined by Simon Thomas, founder of Paragraf. Paragraf is a rare European hard tech company taking graphene from fundamental science into industrial scale electronic products. We'll cover the technology, the product suite, and what it really takes to fund and build a venture-backed hardware company with a founder who has raised a whopping $150 million and is on his way to make a real dent in the universe. Before we start the show, a quick note. If you're building or running a fund, you know it takes the right partners. At EUVC, we only work with sponsors we truly believe should be part of your tech stack. Please do take a moment to hear about them. And if you do, reach out, mention EUVC. It's the best way you can support what we do. Thank you so much. Starting off, HSBC Innovation Banking. If you're a founder, a scale-up, or a VC, you need a bank that actually understands your world. HSBC Innovation Banking backs innovation globally, from seed to IPO. And if you ask me, a strong banking partner like HSBC belongs in your stack. If your portfolio companies are scaling, they need infrastructure that won't slow them down. Google Cloud Starter Program offers $2,000 to $350,000 in credits, plus technical support to build better and faster. It's a key boost every fund should bring into their ecosystem, and oh my God, are we thankful to be partnering with them. Now, legal is a space you cannot lag on. Legal needs to move at the speed of venture. Goodwin's team has decades of experience with startups and funds. They're trusted at every stage from formation to exit. Goodwin definitely is a legal partner every serious manager should have in their stack. For Luxembourg-based VC, PE, and fund of fund managers, modern funds means going digital. Paragraf gives you a full-service, digital native platform built for today's European managers. It's a must-have if you're scaling smart. So we all hear about the Middle East. How about you go there? From AI to deep tech to sovereign fund, Skytech in Dubai is where global future of tech gets negotiated. It's not just a conference, it's where East meets West, capital meets innovation, and the bold set the agenda. If you're playing on the global stage, join us going to Skytech this year. If you're gearing up for a next fundraise and want a placement agent who truly understands emerging managers, reach out to C Funds. They're a boutique placement agency that has helped GPs across Europe raise capital from top-tier LPs. We've been on the other side of the table here. They are actually good ones to work with. So I do urge you to go to cfunds.io to go and check them out. And hey, before you go, if you're looking to discover startups, raise capital, or connect with innovation leaders, do check out dealflow.eu, the EU-backed platform bridging founders, VCs, and corporates. There's no better place to find the startups that have received significant funding from the European innovation ecosystem.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome to the podcast, Simon.
Thank you for welcoming me here. Looking forward to it.
So, Simon, it's an incredible feat that you have already made, and you're going to do so much more in the future. But tell everyone, where are you today? What are you exactly building with Paragraf? And maybe keep it a bit in simple terms, because not everyone will be able to dive directly into deep tech materials.
Yes, sure. I'm happy to give you a bit of background. So Paragraf is a company that works in the world of a material called graphene. Probably heard by most of your listeners. Invented in Manchester back in 2004. Graphene has been known as the wonder material because it has this collection of properties that make it very much more advanced than materials that existed in the world at that point in time. And a lot of people did a lot of work in the lab showing how graphene could create fantastic new electronics with much, much higher performance at much, much lower power. And for the past 20 years, people have been showing just what graphene can do at a large scale. At Paragraf, we wanted to take those inventions, that material, and bring it into the real world where people could exploit and use the material graphene across the electronics industry, and therefore get these performance characteristics into all types of electronics. So the goal for us, and what we invented, if you like, as our main IP, was creating graphene direct on substrates that the semiconductor industry that creates electronics uses today. And that was the massive breakthrough. So in front of me right here, we have a silicon substrate, which is coated in graphene. That substrate goes straight into a processing line, and you can create electronics out of it. So that was the step forward that we made. And today we have a foundry here, the world's first graphene electronics foundry here in the UK, that is starting to put through volume electronics. So we're really trying, as our vision, to bring new materials into the world of electronics to try and solve these problems of high energy use that's coming into things like AI chips, as well as create new performance characteristics that allows people to push on with new inventions out of electronics, make new electronic devices, make new electronic products.
Yeah. And to make it super concrete to people, if I hold up my phone here, which is currently being charged, I believe that with graphene, instead of charging it every day, it would be something like every 7 days or so that a similar phone, so to say, would be able to be charged. And am I correct in that type of application?
Absolutely correct. So if you could change your silicon chips inside that phone to graphene chips, the power requirement is about 90% less. So with the same battery, you obviously can get a lot more running time out of your phone.
Given this and given the urgency of us solving for the energy needs with AI, I think the very most pertinent question, of course, is to ask you, why are we not using graphene yet when we're building these big data centers?
That's probably the greatest question. Graphene is, of course, one layer of carbon atoms thick. So instead of being a bulk material like silicon that's many, many layers of atoms, which you can very easily work with, imagine trying to create a single layer of atoms across that whole substrate. It's very, very difficult to do. And then after you've created it, it's also very difficult to handle. So graphene isn't like conventional materials where the way in which you handle it and process it is well understood. It's a new material with new properties, with quantum and very, very small nanometer scale properties that has to be understood and brought into, if you like, the thought process of the real world as opposed to the lab world. And that's a real challenge. And that's the challenge that Paragraf are overcoming right now.
If you were to put are we on a trajectory that will, it's definite and for sure, we're going to bring everything that's currently made with silicon into the world of graphene, or at least where it's financially viable. Is that the trajectory we're on, or is it specific use cases where the business case will make sense?
That's a really, really interesting point. Graphene is the world's first two-dimensional material, and there are other two-dimensional materials coming after it. Thanks to the breakthrough of being able to create graphene, people have started thinking about, well, what else could we make in 2D form? Could we use other elements like silicon in 2D form? Could we use combined elements to make new types of very, very thin layer semiconductors? So graphene will definitely play a part across a whole range of electronics, but it may well be that some of those other new 2D materials will come in alongside graphene as well. And you actually end up with what I would term as a 2D electronics world. So to answer your question in kind of an esoteric way, I hope, yes, that graphene can go into most things, but also there's this great world of other 2D materials coming behind it because graphene is now proving what can be done. Today, it's more of a business case approach. Does a customer want to use graphene in their electronics? If so, let's have a conversation. Let's use our foundry and build that device for you. But we also have a strategic roadmap looking at how do we get graphene and other two-dimensional materials into compute chips, for example. Let's try and look at how we can lower the energy in data centers such that AI doesn't become this fearful thing of using so much energy in the world.
Yeah. You just described, Simon, the foundry that you have. Is this the core product, the foundry that enables you to build, so to say? Or are you building actual devices as well and plug all the way into the end products?
As a, if you like, deep tech spin out, one of the things you have to prove is that you can make something. You have to have something tangible. So spinning out a foundry isn't really a model that exists,
No.
Unless if you ignore TSMC, which probably was more of a government spin out than a university spin out. But so yeah, we do make products. We always started the company on the back of can we make graphene, and then can we make products out of that graphene to prove to the world, one, that you can make the wafer scale graphene, and two, that you can actually do something with it, because that's really important. Getting over that hump of proof of that you can actually physically use the material itself. So, for example, I have a wafer here that's got devices on it.
Yeah.
And they're devices that we've specified and we've made, we brought out into the world to show, if you like, what I call vanguard technology, proving to the world that something can be done. We're now migrating towards having other people bring their ideas to us, simply because I don't want a BD, a business development overhead. It's much easier if people come to us and say, we'd really like this, as opposed to us pushing products onto other companies. So yeah, there has been product that's been made, and I would invite you to go to our website right now and buy some.
Well, I would love a phone that wouldn't require charging every day. I would also love a watch that wouldn't. I am using a Withings watch, which at least mimics that. So let me ask you, you have a long, like you described this, the invention of graphene in 2014, I believe. And now we fast forward, we're 10 years in. Could you talk a bit about the timelines of graphene development, so to say, from when does it first appear in the research papers and we could see there's something here, to you being able to then say, okay, here's a spin out that we should create. And then from when you were founded up until today, how have you kind of tackled that journey?
Yeah, so absolutely. The first research papers were actually released from Manchester University in 2004. And there's a very famous story about how the now Nobel Prize winners used a roll of Scotch tape and a block of graphite and put them both together and peeled layers off the top of this block of graphite to get the first layers of graphene. And it's I'd urge your listeners to go back and look at that story. It's quite a really nice story of base engineering turning into something fantastic.
Yeah.
So the research papers started to appear back in 2004. People started to think about manufacturing graphene without sellotape around about 2007, 2008. And that's when companies like Samsung started to look at, well, this material's got real advantages. Can we start to manufacture it? And then there's a kind of period from 2007 to 2013 where people struggled to make graphene that was pure enough, that was of high quality enough to get good electronics out of it. So there was lots of research going on in the background, making different chips, the world's fastest transistor, the world's most energy efficient devices, all happening in labs. So huge amount of papers being produced, huge amount of patents being filed. And I think if you add those two things up together, graphene has now got the record of having the most number of papers and patents filed at any invention in the period of time between 2007 and 2015.
And an equally impressive track record when it comes to then real world applications that drive value in the end?
I believe
or is
so.
Or are we still waiting for that?
So. Definitely. The things that have been produced in the lab have been shown to be fantastic. It's always, with these really deep tech inventions, how do you go from lab to real world? And in our world, in the semicon world, that saying is, how do you go from lab to fab? And that's the kind of where we came in. In 2015, I joined the University of Cambridge and worked with a professor there, Professor Sir Colin Humphreys, and we took a look at the devices that were being produced and thought, well, how do we get this to this wafer scale where it becomes useful? And so in 2015, we started experimenting, and then we made the breakthrough. And then really it was about, how do we make the world get access to this? How do we get value out of what we've just done beyond the papers that were being published at a huge rate at that point in time?
Yeah. Tell me, Simon, when did venture investors start to show interest in what you were doing?
So that was end of 2016, going into 2017. We decided to engage with some external investors to test what we had in terms of a prospect. Does this look like it's investable? And that's where this kind of realization of, we can't just give you a wafer of graphene. You're not going to invest in that, because we have to prove that there is actually really something you can make from it. And it was speaking with investors that we reached this point of, okay, if we're going to bring this out of the lab, we're going to have the graphene, but we're also going to have this thing that people can test and pick up in their hand and feel. When we created a few prototypes, or let's call it proof of concepts more than prototypes, really, we could take that to investors, and they started to look at it as a real investable thing. So 2017, we started to get real traction with investors that actually we've got the material and we've got something people can potentially use as customers.
We have a bunch of people in the audience that some are on the investor side, some are on the founder side, but what they're definitely all experiencing is this. They're all constantly meeting this situation of trying to figure out how do I go, as you said, from lab to fab, or how do you get it out of the university? Could you talk a bit about that first initial period talking to investors? What did you meet? And I know that this is now 5-7 years ago, but who were thoughtful? What were you missing from the investors? Where do you think that our venture ecosystem could maybe get a bit more educated when it comes to think about hardware tech that's truly deep tech?
The deep tech landscape, because it's diverse, is quite fragmented. So to find investors that understand what you're actually pitching to them can be quite difficult, particularly if it's a novel technology that you've invented. There's no real experts in the world because you're the expert taking it to the investor. It's critical to have that thing you can put into somebody's hand to say, look, it is something, it is real, it is tangible. I was very fortunate, and the other two founders of the company with me were very fortunate that we managed to be in a place where there were educated people that could look at what we were doing and at least think about what the concept meant. And so we had a group of investors in the Cambridge ecosystem that, even though they didn't really understand the technology, they could theorize about where the technology would go. They were able to do it themselves and have go out and be educated enough to try and find some background. And I think that's the critical thing. I think the deep tech investment ecosystem needs to have those experts within the investment firms. And that's developed a lot since we were trying to get investment. There are a lot of firms now that do have these really, really good deep tech experts. But I go back to my point at the start. It doesn't matter whether you have the most educated deep tech expert. If you're the first one to bring something to them that they've never seen before, they might be, they might be intelligent and able to work it out, but they've never seen it before. So they've still got to get their head around it. So you've still got to help them. You've still got to get them through those hoops, if you like.
And can I ask you, because you have a bit of, in normal venture landscape, you could maybe call this a somewhat interesting syndicate behind you or investors on your journey, because you were seed funded by Cambridge Enterprise and Angels, and then you did your Series A together with Parkwork Advisors, IQ Capital, Amadeus Capital Partners, that many, of course, will know in our ecosystem as revered deep tech investors, especially in the Cambridge ecosystem. The next one was with New Science Ventures, Molten Ventures, and then British Patient Capital came in as well. And I would love to ask you about British Patient Capital, because you also did a 2022 round where you had the UK Treasury / again British Patient Capital involved. And I'd love to ask you about this in a sovereignty agenda that we have, in the context of a sovereignty agenda that's so powerful today. And I imagine it's also what's driving the investment journey that you've been on.
Yeah, really interesting journey we've been on, actually. And actually, it was IQ Capital were the first to believe in what we were doing. First we pitched to, and they kind of got the story really well. They are a very, very knowledgeable deep tech investor, and they've supported us all the way through, which has been fantastic. But yes, going into those different rounds and having those different leads, if you like, who have different ideas about where the company should be heading, it's an interesting journey, let's put it that way. But on your point of sovereign investment, British Patient Capital have been very, very supportive. And I think having somebody from, if you like, the nation where you are located invest in you acts as a catalyst for other people to believe that there is a trust in the technology and a trust in the industry that you're trying to build. So having that, if you like, that national investment behind you acts as a catalyst for inbound investment from different areas. Because if the policymakers And if the people that run the country believe that there's value in having you there and invest in it, it's a nice indicator to be able to talk to other investors and say, look, we've got this confidence in us. We're growing in this ecosystem. The ecosystem believes that we can grow here. So yeah, it was really good to have British Patient Capital come on board, and yeah, they've supported us since, which has been great. We've had a mix of investors. We've now had to, in our Series B, we had a US lead, which is New Science Ventures, who are very semicon focused, which is great because then you get some expertise and understanding of the amount of time, if you like, that needs to go into growing this business, the patient capital and the understanding of what it takes to push products into that world that are brand new in the semiconductor world. And then in our latest round, of course, we've had some great support from the UAE with Mubadala.
Tell me just, if I go back to the sovereignty point and the role of British Patient Capital, could you talk a bit about how you're thinking as someone building truly novel technology, and it's going to be revolutionizing? There's a reason why Silicon Valley is called Silicon Valley. Like, we could imagine a graphene valley if we really get everything right around Cambridge. Could you talk a bit about the role of a company like you for the nearby ecosystem and the support you're enjoying, and maybe also put this in the context of when you, as the founder or one of the founders of Paragraf, are reading all the news about the importance of sovereignty and resilience, how you're thinking as a founder about your own journey and how you fit in that?
Maybe not Graphene Valley. Given that the kind of accepted thing is that graphene has had the deepest trough of disillusionment, i.e. death, valley of death of any material.
Yeah, the deepest death valley of any. Yeah.
Let's maybe call it Graphene Mountain or something. Absolutely. Having a novel technology, a novel material, at least what I would call the platform that you build things on, is a really important thing to consider, because an ecosystem will be generated from what we do, and we're already seeing that happen. A lot of our customers are using our base technology to create their technologies, and a lot of the requirements we have as inputs into our supply chain, those suppliers are having to come up with new things on that side to bring into Paragraf. So you're absolutely right. I always try to look at it from the perspective that Paragraf isn't really bringing a new technology. We're actually bringing a new industry, because materials can change everything, and having that underlying, if you like, building block to build on means that there's so many opportunities, whether it's in the application space, the customer space, or whether it's in the working with us as a partner to create the inputs to the supply chain. Then there's a huge amount of potential for the inventions that we have here and the IP that we have. From that perspective, it's difficult. I don't run a company that sells product. I can't just focus all of my effort on to just saying, let's develop this product, let's get this product to market. I have to think around, how are we going to exploit the underlying materials? How are we going to exploit products that we have? How are we going to get customers to come in and work with the foundry? It's quite a complicated model. It becomes quite a challenge that you can never switch off from and spend a lot of time thinking about. But actually the potential, the real potential of what we do is absolutely massive if you think about it. And then that plays back into the sovereignty perspective that you were talking about. Our materials have the capability to make technologies that are of national security importance. And that then plays into the thought path of, well, where do we actually want to locate our capabilities? There's a lot of geopolitical things going on in the world at the moment, and they seem to change every night with a single tweet from a certain person. And so we have to be aware of what we can and can't do, or even future predict as to where we should and shouldn't be in order to make a successful, valuable business.
Yeah. I'd love to take you back and ask you about your story of, at a point, realizing, okay, we need to actually have products that we can use to show that graphene works in the real world, to now being at this critical juncture of being able to bring customers in to work with your foundry before actually having a product to give them, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a chicken and egg situation. It's you want to give something to a customer, and then you want to make sure that the customer's actually getting the product that they want, and you have to go around this loop. So getting to a minimum viable product, now that doesn't mean the end product. It means something you can put into a customer's hands and they can do a bit of testing with, do a bit of playing with, is really critical for any hard tech company. One of the things you have to be very aware of is that most of the time when you create a product, it's not what the customer wants. You might believe it's what the customer wants, but actually you can ask a customer about all the specs that they want, and you can still stick it in their hands and they'll go, I don't want it in black, I want it in red. And so you'll always miss something. So it's really, if you like, that back and forth between you as a supplier, you as an innovator, you as a manufacturer, and the customer, the user, the end applicator. It's really, really important to have that dialogue going as quick as you can. Even if you don't have a product that's working properly, the quicker you can get into the mindset of the customer, so you don't have to go through as many design iterations, manufacturing iterations, the better. One of our product lines relies exactly on that. So this wafer here shows some devices that are known as molecular sensors. And we create a product that the customer can just use, a plug and play item that the customer can use. That molecular sensor allows you to detect either chemical or biological agents, depending on how it's configured. The customer generally uses that product for their application, and then they come back to us and say, actually, can you make it in this configuration? And so what we've done is built a platform such that we can put something in the customer's hands that they can use, but we know it's not what they're really going to want in the end. But we're encouraging them to come back and talk to us and say, actually, use our foundry. You're already hooked. You're already hooked on our tech. Now come and tell us exactly what you want.
And I can imagine that there's also a capital flow issue here, which is, of course, that when you're developing the products yourself, before they even hit the market, you've taken a lot of capital investment before you can get there. Of course, when you work with a partner, you can offload some of that on the partner. Could you talk a bit about the importance of being able to manage this as this very intricate process compared to being a B2B SaaS founder, which venture has always been very good at, and equity money is quite good to fund, but when you're building hardware, it starts to get very expensive to raise all your capital like that.
I don't think there's a better example than a company like Paragraf for exactly that dichotomy. We are capital intensive. We have to buy machines. We have to buy a facility. And so the upfront capital is big. And you don't have much to sell other than equity at the start. And therefore, you don't have anything to raise against. There's no assets to raise against either. So you do have this position where you have to put a lot of money in to start with. That's why you have to have a lot of belief from your original investors, because they have to put quite a lot of financing into what you're doing. So you have to have a really strong understanding of how you're going to reach that revenue position, and then how you're going to reach a margin that's going to start to give you the capital to start to grow the business independent of equity financing. And for us, once you start to get the capital equipment, once you start to get an IP portfolio, a large IP portfolio, you start to get into the world of being able to raise debt capital then, which is advantageous from a cost perspective, if you like, overall cost perspective, but also puts an extra load on the business of what you've got to think about, how you finance it going forward, how you service the debt and all that type of stuff. But yeah, it's always going through our minds how we plan the business, how do we make sure we're pushing towards that profitability point, which we're not at yet. And how do we make sure that everything we do has a strong ROI, return on invest, and how we then manage that against what we need to invest further as we go further down the line of expanding the foundry that we've got at the moment. We are not done spending yet, which is something we have to model in all the time. And you're right. The best customers we can have are people that want to adopt graphene, want to adopt 2D materials, and want to put it into their ecosystems themselves, different commercial ecosystems, and are willing to put some skin in the game, if you like, and take some of that load, that capital load. But to get there, you have to go back, going all the way back to the start. You have to be able to put something in their hand where they go, yes, we trust this. And so it's a catch-22 situation. How do you get far enough along for the customer to trust you to then put their trust and their capital into you so that you can then finance the business into the future?
Can you talk through some of the moments where you've truly been able to make a breakthrough that allowed you to survive one of the hardship periods? Because every company has these. You, of any, must have had some where you looked and said, oh my God, how are we going to solve this?
Yeah, I think this all comes down to probably what I would call the most important part of the business, which is the people that we have. We've had a lot of challenges in this company, and it's really the tech expertise, the real drive of the company, the real heart of operations, and that really believe in the vision. And when we're going through a hard time, pick themselves up and go, we're going to push on, we're going to keep pushing on. We're going to find in commercial, we're going to find new applications that we can make with the equipment we have at the moment and hook customers. And then the development team and the production team go, yeah, we can make this and we can get it into customers' hands. So we've had a fair few hardships. I think you may have read that we went through a National Security Investment Act review last year, which highlights the national security implications of the technology that we have. That lasted for 7 months. That put the company on hold for 7 months. And in that time, we had to not really freeze what we were doing, but we had to go back to basics and start looking at other technologies. So last year, while we couldn't get our production line up and running because we were waiting for the capital to be released, the people in the company turned around and went, well, what else can we do? How can we get through to other customers? How can we make something else in the interim that's going to grow that funnel of opportunities when we come out of that period? And actually that wafer I showed at the start, this one here, is what came out of that. And so now we have a new product line that can be manufactured that's highly valuable.
I want to ask you about two things, because yes, you gave a lot of credibility or credit to your people here. I think there are two constituents that are, as you described, super important. One is, of course, your staff, and one are your investors. And both of them, and I want to give credit to you for this, because in the end, you're the CEO and one of the founders. That is, you're the one who's giving everyone confidence and must give everyone confidence that we can go through this together. So could you talk about both how you managed to keep the investor sentiment strong, and at the same time also, how did you manage to make your, and I'm sure, incredibly gifted staff that could go anywhere else and do their work and build their wealth, how did you keep them with you and not say, oh my God, this will never work?
Really, really good question. From an investor perspective, I've always tried to be very honest and open about what we're doing. I try to set KPIs and milestones that the business can achieve, and always drive very hard to make sure that those milestones are met. Of course, there's slippage sometimes, there's unforeseen circumstances, but on the whole, I try to be very, very honest with investors about what we can and can't do. And that sets the playing field. And so most milestones in Paragraf, even though we've been through some difficult times, most milestones have been met. Those inflection points we're talking about have been met. And of course, that hopefully gives the investors confidence in what you're planning, what you're managing is a continual growth in value. People would like the line to be nice and straight, or even a hockey stick in some cases, but actually it's more up and down all the time. But as long as the trend is going in that direction, and you can have those honest conversations with your investors, then there's a level of trust. I expect that back as well. If an investor talks to me and says, well, if you hit this target, then we're going to help you do this, or if you hit this target, then we'll think about financing more. That has to be a very kind of open relationship. So and also, if we're not going to hit something, be honest about it as soon as I possibly can. So I think that our investors appreciate that. From a staff perspective,
let me just stay on investors for a second, because there's a lot of founders that are battling to make sure that they have their investors' confidence in what they're doing, and especially in deep tech startups, oftentimes you have investors that are maybe not as used to do deep tech investments as IQ Capital and the group that we mentioned. IQ has been doing this forever. They're on fund 6 or so now. And as such, they know the journey and they know what to expect. But with the rise of deep tech and the importance of venture getting into atoms instead of just bits, we are definitely seeing a lot of investors that are used to different journeys back in companies where the founders expect that the investors are ready for this, but sometimes they're unfortunately not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that comes down to the founders as well. Selecting the right investors, getting to know your investors before you actually bring them on board. Because if there's a difference in expectations, and I don't mean expectations of what the company's going to be, I mean expectations of the individuals on both the investor side and the founder side, then they will come to the surface quite quickly. And so making sure that there is a if you like, an eye-to-eye kind of agreement that this is what we're aiming for as stakeholders, as joint stakeholders of what we're trying to build. That's really, really important. I think one of the things to be wary of in today's world is with the kind of tech crunch that's happened over the past few years, there is more expectation on revenue growth than there ever has been, and even at early stage. And so there's a need to be able to understand as a founder how you're going to get to that point and articulating that as well. For us in deep tech and hard tech, that's a if you like, a shallower line than it would be for a SaaS business. But you have to be honest with that. You have to say, look, this is what it's going to take. And they're all different shapes of businesses, and especially as there are quite a few funds, as you point out, that are quite agnostic now. And you can't put those two models together. You can't say, oh yeah, we've got these in our portfolio that have got this hockey curve, therefore you're coming into portfolio, you're going to do the same. You've got to see what the end value is, you've got to see what the realization of that capital is. And so I think it's really important that getting to know each other's expectations happens before you're sitting in your first board meeting.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you talk a bit about the interim, so to say, between board meetings? Like in the beginning, we tend to have a very, how should I put it, informal chat between investor and founder. And as you then progress through the journey, everything gets a bit more formalized and the board meetings take up a bigger and bigger role. And that's where you kind of do your reporting and stay in sync. Is that a true description of your journey as well? Are there tricks that you would say as you get further down the line that you really advise founders take and make use of when it comes to keeping investor alignment strong?
Actually, it was a bit different for us. I actually had monthly board meetings at the start. And so we had every month I was meeting with our board members. And I actually found that very, very useful because you're very busy. And if you've got 4 or 5 people on your board, just having an independent chat every month is 5 phone calls or 5 meetings, or whereas one board meeting, it sounds like a lot having a board meeting every month. But actually, in terms of the time spent in aligning everybody with what you're doing, it wasn't a bad thing at all. Now, as the business moves on, I and
Tell
the
me,
strategic...
before we go to as the business moves on, tell me a bit about the agenda that you had for a standing board meeting every month. What would be the key agenda items to get through?
At that point in time, it was really a progress update, because we were taking a capital, we were looking for things like premises and staff and, getting services in place. And that's where our early stage investors were really helpful. Where do we get our lawyers from? Where do we get this service from? Where do we get that software from? Because they've dealt with lots and lots of invested companies, and therefore they can bring that in. So the early stages, if you like, the operational input that the board could have and be very useful with, they didn't need deep tech knowledge. That what they needed was to help us get the business up and running. So those early stage meetings, if you like, were all about how do we work together to get this business off the ground? How do we get the operational stuff done? How can you help me not have to go and talk to 5 different lawyers? Just tell me which is a really good one for our business type, and we'll go with it. Yeah. And so
progress update and roll your sleeves up. Those 2 parts.
Exactly, and I think that that early stage kind of very fast turnaround of, well, we know somebody who could do a website for you, and they're actually very cost effective because we've used them in several other. Perfect, let's just do it. So yeah, it's that those early stages are more what I would call tactical. We did have the strategy that we were aligning to in terms of objectives, and we generally reported on where we were with respect to those objective timelines. And every year we used to have a strategy day, a full day with the board as well, where we could really hammer out all of this stuff. Then as we move forward, of course, there's a lot more to be done on the business. The business is established. We're starting to get through BD, and we're starting to get through getting into customers' hands, prototypes. The board meetings start to reduce off a bit, so they then drop to once every 2 months. The reporting then starts to become a lot, verging more towards the strategic as opposed to the tactical. What kind of customers are we talking to? Can you, as a board, help me unlock the door to some of these customer types? And then as you progress forward, it becomes more and more strategic. And today we have quarterly board meetings, and it's all about what we're doing in the future. Does the board like the strategy in the format we've got? How are we pushing forward? So you move from what I would call reporting to projecting, and that has to happen over time. And balancing when you need those different things from your board of directors is really important. I'm not saying I got it right, by the way. I've learned a lot from it.
Well, you're quite successful, so I think that it's worthwhile at least peeking into your worldview and how you're doing things. Now let's then go to the staff side. How did you ensure that you had your team along the way? I know so many journeys where, honestly, when you talk to the founder a bit off camera and so on, they say, "Oh man, is it difficult to know that we're struggling with the raise and blah, blah, blah." And I at the same time have a staff that's on their way on to maternity leave or something like that, and you don't know if there's going to be something like, what should I tell them? Like, navigating through this is not an easy thing.
One of the things that's been my greatest learning journey, actually, as being CEO of Paragraf, is just how important it is to take care of your staff, not just from a kind of care of them physically, but care of what they believe in, care of what they want to drive towards. Of course, there's always tangible rewards, but there's also what I would call mental rewards. How people are feeling about what they're doing. Are they enjoying what they're doing? Are they driving towards something that their values are aligned with? I know this is talked about a lot, and particularly on the investor side, it's not considered so much, but I talk with my peers a lot about how you have a purpose, a vision, and values in the business. I know people talk about mission and other stuff. For me, that's not that important. But the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing, the vision of what it is you want to achieve, and how Paragraf is going to do that, and then the values, i.e., how you operate the business, how you carry yourself, how everyone in the business should carry themselves. They are really important. If you can communicate them in a strong way, then you generally, I find, have people gravitate towards that viewpoint. The right people come to the right place. We always talk about our purpose and values in interviews. This is what we do as Paragraf. This is why we're doing it. And I think if you have that symbiotic relationship between the people that are working with you and the company, then there's always what I would call a combined drive between everybody in the company to want to get to that goal. And so when it gets to hard times, or when it comes to fundraising times, or when it comes to maybe situations that are out of your control but are having an impact on the business, you still have that collective drive towards getting to the exciting goal that you want at the end of the rainbow, if you like. I'm very open with the staff. I have communications meetings. It was monthly, but it's now quarterly, where I will tell the staff exactly what's going on. This is where we are with our fundraising. This is the level of risk that we have. This is the things we're trying to do to get over that. And I think that goes a long way, because people feel they're part of what's going on then. It's when people don't know what's going on that I think you start to get disillusionment. And we know that from experience. I've seen it in the past from mistakes I've made. I think carrying people on the journey because they want to be on the journey with you is so important.
You've obviously grown a lot along the way. You just said you've learned a lot. I'd love to ask you about going from being in the lab as a founder to now running a multi-million company with 150 million raised, incredible success, but also like the challenges you're facing, the role that you have when you step into the board meeting, the role you have now as a CEO is very different from when it was back in the days. Can you talk about that? Maybe just also for everyone to know, where is the organization today? How many people? What kind of functions are the important ones? Like that type of thing.
The organization today is about 110 people. We're located in 2 sites in Cambridgeshire, an R&D site, and the manufacturing site, which is this site here, which is the new site that we put our first wafers through the foundry at the end of last year. We also have a subsidiary in the US, in San Diego, which was the result of an acquisition. So we acquired a US company, a rare thing for a UK company to acquire a US company. But there were very aligned technologies and IP, so it was quite good. We're just about to open our office in Shanghai, and we're just about to open an office in the UAE as well. So we're growing globally. We're going through a process of, I would say in terms of the lifetime of the business, we're on that revenue scaling part of the SME growth, if you like. And a lot of our efforts are now going into commercialization and scaled technology production. I think in terms of the important parts over the lifetime of the company, I think that changes. I think right at the start, we hired out of the university really good scientists, really intelligent people, and you need that right at the start to try and get that first product made. And then that moves into a phase of needing more operational people, more engineers, if you like, that can realize that as something that's a stable product, as you then start to grow your commercial team as well, alongside the leadership team that you need for the different phases of business. But it's an evolutionary thing that you have to go through. I think that's one thing that I've learned a lot about is, I think if I did it again, the need to maybe have a bit more of a change of those skill sets over a quicker period. That's something that I think I've learned a lot from. But in terms of going from being in the lab into the fab, I think it's been I should just say, before I joined the university, I was working in the semicon world in Asia. So I'd already worked in the corporate world for about 12 years. So it wasn't alien to me. But now running this company I think the biggest thing that always gets me is, I remember doing that first process run and creating graphene on that first wafer and go, well, this is great. There's something on this substrate. And now sitting here and thinking, we're serving customers all over the world. We're growing internationally. We've raised all that money. We're growing our headcount, and it looks like we've got some really, really good application spaces that will have beneficial impact on the world. And I think back and go, and that all came from just doing that thing that arrived on a wafer. It's insane to realize sometimes what can come out of just one little experiment.
Yeah. Well, that is the beauty of venture and the beauty of tech. I want to ask you one final question here before I let you go. And that goes to AI and how we're all talking about AI is changing everything. And here I am talking to one of the people in the world doing most pioneering work when it comes to materials. A lot of people are talking about how AI will actually disrupt how we can discover new materials and how we can work with new materials because we can model. Are you seeing this? Has it been with you almost from day one? What are you seeing?
Yeah, really, really important part of speeding up what I call the innovation cycle going forward. The materials modeling space across lots of different industries, that, when we're talking materials, they can be things like the base materials for drug development. It can be base materials that are going into construction. It can be things going into advanced materials and electronics. So there's a lot of work going on, and there's a lot of really good work going on. I think there's still a bit of a missing bridge at the moment, which is that we can model the materials and we can model the properties and we can model through AI what the potential outcomes are. But it comes back to what can you actually really make in the real world. And so while it's great to see all of these new materials modeled, somebody has to do that lab to fab, if you like, journey again with each of the materials. And I'm really sure going forward that somebody will be able to put together a linking into the manufacturing processes that exist to bridge that gap of, yeah, we can model this material and this is how you make it, but this is how you make it is something that's not quite there yet. Now, we are engaged with those models and we are looking at how we can potentially make new materials through our processing techniques. Not been that successful yet, but it's moving forward at a very, very rapid pace.
It's an incredible time. Simon, thank you so much for taking an hour out of your day to just talk to me here in the European venture and tech space. I'm so thankful that you are building here in Europe, and I'm so thankful that you came on the podcast. Thanks so much.
Really appreciate it. Great to be here. Have a great day.
Before we start the show, a quick note. If you're building or running a fund, you know it takes the right partners. At EUVC, we only work with sponsors we truly believe should be part of your tech stack. Please do take a moment to hear about them. And if you do, reach out, mention EUVC. It's the best way you can support what we do. Thank you so much. Starting off, HSBC Innovation Banking. If you're a founder, a scale-up, or a VC, you need a bank that actually understands your world. HSBC Innovation Banking backs innovation globally, from seed to IPO. And if you ask me, a strong banking partner like HSBC belongs in your stack. If your portfolio companies are scaling, they need infrastructure that won't slow them down. Google Cloud Starter Program offers $2,000 to $350,000 in credits, plus technical support to build better and faster. It's a key boost every fund should bring into their ecosystem, and oh my God, are we thankful to be partnering with them. Now, legal is a space you cannot lag on. Legal needs to move at the speed of venture. Goodwin's team has decades of experience with startups and funds. They're trusted at every stage from formation to exit. Goodwin definitely is a legal partner every serious manager should have in their stack. For Luxembourg-based VC, PE, and fund-of-fund managers, modern funds means going digital. Fundcraft gives you a full-service, digital native platform built for today's European managers. It's a must-have if you're scaling smart. So we all hear about the Middle East. How about you go there? From AI to deep tech to sovereign fund, Skytex in Dubai is where global future of tech gets negotiated. It's not just a conference, it's where East meets West, capital meets innovation, and the bold set the agenda. If you're playing on the global stage, join us going to Skytex this year. If you're gearing up for your next fundraise and want a placement agent who truly understands emerging managers, reach out to C Funds. They're a boutique placement agency that has helped GPs across Europe raise capital from top-tier LPs. We've been on the other side of the table here. They are actually good ones to work with. So I do urge you to go to cfunds.io to go and check them out. And hey, before you go, if you're looking to discover startups, raise capital, or connect with innovation leaders, do check out dealflow.eu, the EU-backed platform bridging founders, VCs, and corporates. There's no better place to find the startups that have received significant funding from the European innovation ecosystem.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.